We're live.
So this is the backstage with cab business here that we were going to do for you guys on another time because we were having this sort of really interesting conversation, and I went live, and Nathan didn't know that I went live.
I knew.
But this is a subject that came up because of a conversation between me and one of our friends. By the way, you can see the monies here. We're going to intro everyone properly once the show starts. You can see Dave Smethers just below me there in the right-hand corner, and of course Debs. But Nathan, do you have any reticence to connect with the phenomenon if with a given modality?
I don't.
Hi, Jules.
But I'm not. I certainly don't. Pretend to be skilled at that or have had particularly successful experience with it. I've had a minor experience with it that was, I would call, positive, but nothing in terms of a CE5 seeing something in the sky, something like that. But in terms of like setting intention and kind of getting a response to setting intention, I've definitely had something like that.
Deb, any reticence about
I
making
try to
connection?
do. Yeah, I've tried to do CE5 by myself a couple times, and one time I had a fun little orb sighting, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cute," and it like just kind of did like a peekaboo, and then I made a right turn and went off. Um, so I was like, "Oh, that was cute," and I felt like it was a hello. But the next time I did it, when I did it, I just felt extremely drained, like I was zapped. So I just think, those kinds of things you should probably do with other people.
But
Maybe people with
I remember your one of your feelings, Deb, was that you said that you're worried about who are you calling out to.
right, exactly. And honestly, sometimes I even think that when we do these, we might be annoying them. They're like,
Mm.
like, why do you keep calling us? Like, we're busy. We're surveying your planet.
So, Dave, we got about 3 minutes till the show starts, maybe less. Are you reticent to try to connect with the
God, I thought we were live then, DJ. Jesus, I was being very careful. Yeah.
Well, we are live. We are live, but we're backstage.
No, I'm with you. I am a bit reticent. I think it's the old Ouija board scenario. You've got to, if you don't know what you're messing with, you should be careful. I mean, I don't know. I've thought about it, but I've not come to a conclusion, as we often do in life. And I think I am a little bit reticent, but see, I don't believe it's all love and light, but equally, I don't believe it's all terrible either. That's my dilemma. But I think my Claudate Patanums are probably the size of a pea because I've never really experienced anything. So I suspect it won't really come up. I think I'm destined to be. It might be good if mind controls the game. I might be the only one left standing. But apart from that, I don't think I'll see much.
I think yours is the size of an avocado. But anyway.
But I mean, Frank, I think Frank, he has quite a few. Well, he's had quite a few experiences, I think.
Oh, has he?
Yeah. But I wouldn't. I would ask him about that first, privately. but nothing UFO wise. More like synchronicity stuff like that. So I think he's got a real.
Well, the police had that. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
All right, so this is Backstage with Cab. Probably not the most compelling banter we ever, but because I had this discussion with Mick a little while ago, I thought, man, let me see what these guys think about connecting, because I've heard Deb say a long time ago one of her concerns about CE5, but then if you talk to James, maybe James has a really good filter and a really good shield, so not everybody has that. And then we could get into, because Nathan might also think that when people have a sort of a spirit inhabit them that's not the friendliest or with the best intent, it could be through something that's the same but using a different name. So, religion might call it one thing. And by the way, nobody let me forget, specifically Dave, because after Dave's done, we have a question from Dan Warren, Dave's brother. So
Nice.
we got to get to that. So
Well,
I'm gonna
On
read
the
that.
subject of C5 too, if folks have done it in the chat and want to share their experience, please drop
Yes.
feelings about it there.
I've got two questions. One that's a short one and one's a longer one, and we'll just see how we go. I don't want to kill all the time though, yeah. So just what were you thinking?
Yeah, we're gonna have to do that during the show because we're about to start. So
cool. Sorry. I'll sort it out.
Yeah, we've got like 30 minutes earmarked for you, Dave. So
all right, good. Well, that's good then. Yeah.
Okay. Is that good?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. I yield my time to the senator from Manchester. Okay. All right, go ahead, Nathan.
I want to say happy birthday to Julie real quick.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
She's all right as well, yeah.
Happy birthday, Jules.
Yeah.
Duncan, Av, everybody, bienvenidos. Welcome. We're about to get into it.
All right, stand by, folks.
Yeah! Welcome back to Calling All Beings on a very special episode because we celebrate my brother, Money Nathan. It's going to be all Nathan all night. So I'm your host, DJ. Throat bothering me again, but not enough not to be here. That's all that matters. Nothing like what made me have to postpone the show the other night. We're very excited. We got a special guest in the room from the UK, Manchester's own. We're about to get to him, but before that, the man of the hour, Monet. Nathan, my artist brother. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I've been looking forward to this all day. I have no idea what to expect. No one has given me these questions in advance. These people haven't. I've seen a couple that have been sent my way on X. But other than that, it's just a free-for-all, and I'm a little bit worried about it, but it's going to be fun. We're going to have a good time.
He's going to do – this is like what Dr. Pasulka has to deal with every week. Is she's got to sit there, get in that hot seat, right? And everyone's like, she's a PhD. She's going to give me a brilliant answer. That is pressure, baby.
A lot of pressure.
Right?
Well, she's a pro, though.
Huh?
She's a pro, though. She's very good.
Pro.
Yeah.
She's a pro. But I'll tell you what, she is a pro, man. We love Dr. Pasulka. Hopefully she's going to be joining us as a guest co-host on the upcoming episode with Mike Masters. We're trying to see if we can get these stars literally and figuratively to align with their schedules, as Dave might say, because he's posh.
Schedules, dear boy, schedules.
So we're going to see if we can get that, and perhaps Dr. Pasulka will join us for Dr. Mike Masters coming up in February. Is that name? Yeah, first week February. Yeah. And so now here is, I'll tell you what, this young lady right here, our paragon of cab virtue, said, okay, best question of the night, gets a can of DJ skincare formula. Game on. So
she's ready.
Hi,
like
Deb.
she's put it up and everything. You can't see it, guys, but
Yeah,
she's ready.
First question. Where is the background with a big hot seat for Nathan? That's what we need right now.
Look at that. And I want to see the eyebrow. Get that. Do you have the pipe?
I do have the pipe.
Yeah.
Quite good to see
There
the
you go.
dark sun.
I need a throne with flames. Throne with flames.
All right, real quick. I want to say hello. Duncan's here. Julie, happy birthday. Jonathan, welcome back. Anon in the building. And now we want to talk about our special guest host before we do our promo for Vinny's show. This man is Nathan, he is a brilliant mind in contextualizing, in thinking of storylines, in cutting through some of the BS and the chaff that's thrown out there in terms of what's happening in the news with the phenomenon, with legislation. He gives no quarter. Let me tell you that. Okay. He gives no quarter. He is the great one, Dave Smethers from Manchester.
Oh, Oh, thanks for that, DJ. You've made me feel a bit embarrassed there. You haven't heard me questions yet, mate. You don't know. I might disappoint you.
Dave, you're my
You'll never
closest.
disappoint, Dave.
You're the only connection between me and the Beatles, and you're
I'm 30
my only
miles.
connection.
I'm 30
What?
miles down the road, but I suppose to you, we all sound the same, really. I suppose that's not meant to be bad. It's not a Game of Thrones moment because we sound a bit.
No, you sound like the Fab Four to me. I don't know.
That's right. No, that's
Anyway,
fine. Should we?
before we get into questions, brothers and sisters, want to throw this up for our brother Vinny from Disclosure Team. You guys have heard him. You guys have seen him. He has an enormous presence, literally internationally. Vinny does. I got to check the numbers, but thousands and thousands of subscribers on both Instagram and on YouTube. And his podcast is actually available through his Patreon. So you can look for Disclosure Team on Patreon. There he is on X, at Disclosure Team _ and on IG, it is at Disclosure _ Team. Vinny Adams, take it away, Vinny, real quick. Let's get a comment from you, Debs, and even my man, Dave Smethers.
I'm just always excited to see what Vinny's got going on. He's always got some interesting people coming to chat with him. All the greatest hits in the UFO community come and talk to Vinny. So definitely take a look at that if you haven't yet. Good stuff.
Yeah, he's definitely. Sorry,
Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead, brother.
Well, he's definitely a steady ship in a sea of sort of uncalm waters, isn't he? He gets a lot of good guests. He's pretty consistent. He tries not to commit himself, so which is quite interesting, really. So I mean, I commit myself a bit more than him, I think, but it's quite. I think the show he's doing, he's done some really outstanding work this year, and he's clearly making the right connections and representing us well in the sector. I think, really, in the community, I should say. I was at work then, the sector.
He really is. He's bringing a lot of news, Nathan. Like, he's got a lot of great connections. So
he's got great hair and greater questions.
That's true. Great hair. He did.
He looked for the hair, but stay for the questions because they're amazing.
He looked fantastic when I saw him in North Carolina. I got to say that out there, ladies. He is taken, but he looked great anyway. Lisa, welcome. So with that, let's get started with the show. And I'm going to turn it over to, we talked about how thoughtful Dave's questions are. He's a friend of the show and want to give him an opportunity before he goes to bed to have his first chance to have a nice little dialogue with Nathan. So Dave, take it away, please.
No, I'm here for the duration, DJ. I'm sorry to tell you.
Okay, mate.
I'm not going to bed early. Don't worry. But I've been thinking recently. I've been talking about the phenomenon and its religious aspects and some of the tools that we get from what we need from the philosophy of religion and all the rest of it. So I've got a couple of things I wanted to talk about with Nathan in the form of questions and whatever. But the first one, just to start off with an easy one, and you can stop me, DJ, anytime if you think I'm asking too many questions as the referee.
I will. Don't worry.
Nathan can, or Nathan can just tell me what he thinks of me. But anyway, the first one is, and I'll just read this. It's Diana Pasulka said that in a religious studies, normally you don't question the experience, just study the effects of the belief. But she realized with UAP, here was a belief in a phenomenon that could actually be observed happening in real time. So she had to jump from sort of impassionate observer to studying it using her investigative and philosophical tools. So how useful do you think these tools are, Nathan, in this context? And how far can we take the conclusions?
That's a great question, Dave. I knew Dave would bring like a light one to start with, just a real
get you warmed up.
No, that's a fantastic question, and really, quite frankly, aligns with a lot of the things that I think about when I read her recent book, Encounters, because what you touched on there is I think the kind of root of the issue. And here we have in academia an approach to studying anything that typically tries to remain as neutral as possible. It tries to treat the subject matter objectively as possible, and limit the observers, the academics' subjectivity and subjective bias onto what is being studied. And as you point out, though, with this particular phenomena, the UFO phenomena, it's something that clearly intersects with our subjectivity. And if you think about it, I think we're living in a time where we're a little bit more prepared to address that part of the experience. And I say that because in part because of what we're learning with quantum physics, where we have the role that the observer plays in reality, that there is this interplay between observer and observed, that you really cannot disentangle the two. And I think we've sort of danced around that a little bit in our academic studies of lots of things in the last few decades. We started to realize that we can't really separate our own selves from what we're studying. So if you read a lot of folks who are doing like political analysis or historical analysis or literary analysis, they're much more upfront with the fact that they come from a certain contextual position when they're reviewing that material, and they're going to interpret it from that particular lens. And I think we need to just be more open with that, more upfront with that, and quite frankly, because we're we like to think that we're not doing that, but we really have been doing it all along. So it's being a little bit more honest with our own participation in what we are studying. And so I think that that's good. I think that's more authentic. I think that's more genuinely human, that we recognize that we are part of what is being studied. I think it raises new challenges, though, because let me just introduce the the notion of what we have all heard of, and these are experiencer accounts, experiencer stories. So how do you kind of digest all of these different elements from these experiencers and come to some classical academic conclusions about them? We typically want to be able to sort those experiences into buckets and then be able to come to objective conclusions. And I'm not so certain that we're going to be able to do that very well. I think it's going to be a lot more challenging than and more of a challenging exercise, and we have to be a little bit more fluid in what we're taking from that. So a long-winded answer to your question, but it's absolutely part of it. And we asked her this, on our show too, and pointed out that very much the same thing, that you've kind of got to be a part of what it is that you're studying, and our whole sort of thought process about anything that we're studying in our world today, I think, is shifting more towards an acknowledgement that we are a part of what is being studied, that this whole object subject paradigm isn't really genuine, doesn't really exist.
Yeah, but a lot of the things Pasulka used, you're right. She used a lot of the tools to understand religious experiences with the saints and all the rest of it, but only sort of her academic tools could understand. And that was fine, I think, when they were in that safe sort of environment of not really just objectively dispassionate looking at it. But now she's got to apply those tools, which are deeply rooted in a lot of religious ideas and Greek philosophical ideas, to sort of explain the phenomenon, which is both a benefit, but it's also a risk in that you're potentially putting ideas around idealism and all the rest of it, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, all these things onto the sort of phenomenon, and that's the thing that I think's both a brilliant gift, but also potentially not a curse, but a bit of a, to carry on the religious metaphor, but it's something that we need to think about as well. How far do the existing tools we've got, which are imperfect, affect our understanding of phenomenon and maybe take us off base because of our philosophical developments as a society?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we do have to be careful of. I think this does sort of challenge our epistemological assumptions. What is it that we can know? How much can we know about the phenomena? This to me speaks to the fact that there's always a limitation of our knowledge, and that is frustrating because we like to think that there is no limitation, that if we can just find the right flashlight, we can illuminate the dark corners of what we don't understand. And it may very well be that there are aspects of reality that we really just will not be able to understand with any of the tools that we bring to bear on it. At least I like to think that's probably the case. No matter how far advanced our learning may become, there are always going to be new frontiers in reality that we have not explored, are blind to, and it makes our models imprecise. I mean, I think that's important too. We have to remember that we're working with models. We're not working with the territory itself. We're working with maps. We're always working with maps, not the actual landscape. And so if we keep that in mind and remember that that's kind of how we're moving through the world, it'll keep us a little bit more grounded. And I think learn to trust our actual experience, maybe more so than the map itself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just want to run through something about quantum physics because you mentioned that earlier. And I'll just take you through my sort of simplistic sort of take on it, as it were. That's not to be mealy mouthed, but just as I take it, because I think I veer off a couple of things. So let's say that all matter is energy that vibrates at a certain rate. And we know the Higgs boson, that God particle, as you say, makes it real. That's, I'm simplifying it. I know we could argue about all of this. And let's say that you've got non-local time where everything is happening and coexists at the same time. But when we see quantum entanglement, that suggests that is suggested by that. Then you've got local time, which is where we are. The arrow of time is being introduced. And so we've got cause and effect in 3 or 4 dimensions. So there might be other realities above ours, but we can't really conceive of them. They exist. But I think the point that is that external reality sort of exists, but in different states, not just in our minds. And that's the point at which I think some of the religious thinking around idealism and God's mind and all that maybe it's not a problem, but it's an issue where the rubber starts to hit the road. So as we know, the double slit experiment provides awareness that consciousness has an influence on matter to some extent, and that the act of observation sort of gives something a reality. But we also know things sort of have continuity, they coexist outside of us, which would suggest there's some sort of consciousness that's external to us that is doing this observation that's so necessary. And that, you could argue, there's a shard of that in all of us. That could be the sort of God thing, you know. And so I just wonder, there's a link to a lot of the religious ideas, like you've got Gnosticism or Hermetic stuff, where God needs to create somebody so it can see itself, as it were. You've got Gnosticism, where we're in a material, imperfect, representation. Then we've got Hegel mixed the two up, and he thought about progression through opposites. So you've got all these ideas, I think, but we can see linking to these ideas of quantum physics. I'm going to shut up in a minute, but I just want to finish to my denouement, as it were.
I was going to say, Nathan, you thought you had long preambles. You got nothing on Dave.
This is good, though. This is good context. So
quite important, though.
I'm kidding because I love.
Well, no, you're a good man, DJ. If a man who interrupts, but anyway,
that's part of the show. It's
when I listen to Douglas Hoffman, who seems to jump some of us perceiving reality differently, which I really am all for, but then he leaps in a way to assumption that we're solely generated by consciousness. I can see this sort of hermetic thing. And I think Diana Pasulka sometimes looks at the cave, but sort of assumes there's a reality out there is somehow spiritual. Now, I know I'm simplifying here, but I think what Hoffman and the others are saying is like a totally consciousness-generated reality. It's not real. And it's, in fact, I think it's just different versions of objective reality in different states. Do you see what I mean? So that quantum thing I described, the 3D, the 4D, the 5D, that still exists objectively, which has been the big problem in philosophy. Now, the point I'm coming to is that if the others or the phenomenon know this, and they know how to manipulate, if we could see, we might see them as gods or part of God's will or kind of a super reality, rather than sort of objectively real beings who just understand the relationship of consciousness to states of matter. And so that's where, if you can see, so we're thinking, my God, this is something we recognize in our philosophy that's over our reality, that's part of God or part of whatever that universal consciousness is. But in fact, it may be beings who just understand that consciousness is like a force, like gravity. It's isn't creating reality, but it's part of it. And they're just manipulating it. And that could have and that's where I think a philosophical sort of religious idealist view could take us away from what it is. I don't really. That's where I got to thinking about it, and that was what I wanted to not ask you, Nathan, but see what you thought about that and pick it apart as you wish.
Sure. So, I mean, Dave knows, and maybe some people know who are watching the show, I do take a more idealist approach to the phenomenon. And so he's kind of asking to some degree whether or not that commitment to idealism is going to be in conflict with something that we may overlook. Yeah. And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we overcommit to idealism, that we're kind of leaving something out of the equation. And I think that's a healthy concern. I think we have to be willing to leave space for an element of whatever this is that as I said before, is outside of the model that we think is most effective, most operative. The challenge that I have with materialism is that there's nothing that I can experience in my own reality that is taking place outside of my conscious awareness. Right. So we can all kind of agree, and this is essentially what we've done in classical materialism. We have agreed that there is this thing called objective reality that exists outside of our own conscious experience of it, but there's really no firsthand way to prove that. And so we're in that kind of dilemma. So, but I think that's okay. I think it's okay to have a little bit of respect and space for that, because it very well may be that idealism is more or less a bridge to some other overarching model that kind of incorporates all of these aspects better than it does on its own. And I tend to, if you look at history, for example, in terms of movements, right, we typically have kind of pendulum swings and movements of thinking about the world, thinking about reality. I think idealism is sort of swinging, is the other swing from materialism, and I think that it's a necessary course correction to what materialism has sort of brought for us. But I don't think it's the end either. I think that it's really just a part of that movement of thought, of ideas, of philosophy, and that's going to continue to change as we go. And to your point about the others and maybe their ability to manipulate or intersect with our reality in ways that acknowledge the existence of something outside of just our conscious awareness. I mean, absolutely, it's certainly possible. Until we know more, it's hard to say otherwise. I just think that from where I sit right now, the idealist model is the model that best explains most all of the phenomena that I have observed from all of the stories that I have heard. It has the greatest explanatory power, in other words. But I certainly don't think it's the end all be all. I think there will be other models that eventually take its place.
No, I think that's really interesting. I mean, for me, I think consciousness, or the impact of consciousness in quantum physics, is the big game changer. Because before that, you could argue essentially materialist reality, and it was all cause and effect and all the rest of it, and you had continuity, things existed, and we all recognized them. But once you've got consciousness having that impact, that's very similar to these ancient models of a sort of God and was having shards of existence within ourselves, and it's very, very, very similar. And so I think that's a big change. It's certainly a change in my thinking, as I said to you privately a few months ago. But my big issue is when we get to, and I think Hoffman's brilliant, by the way, so don't get me wrong, I think it's fantastic, and Diana Pasulka as well. But when you get to some bits of when it's on the street, it just all gets very hazy, like it's a dream, you can't quite get to it, you know what it is. But yeah, so I think, I think it's quite important. But I think the key thing for me is that reality does exist in some way, but not quite in the so consciousness is maybe part of it, as I said, like a gravity or something, or not gravity, a force, right. But it isn't created in and of itself, and it's just in our minds, and it's whether that's for me where I am now. So I agree. Idealism offers a good model, i.e. we're not perceiving reality, but it's whether the quantum model shows us something else, and in that is where the phenomenon operates. I think that's what I think.
Yeah, I do like that, and I want to come back to that if we have time.
Yeah,
there's something in that I want to kind of extrapolate further, but I know we got other questions. So
yeah. So that was good. That yeah,
and I just want to add to this. I find that when you try to pigeonhole the phenomenon in one area, famously we had Grant Cameron on the show, and he said it's all consciousness, it's all consciousness, it's nothing but consciousness. Well, there's a craft that hovered over Bob Salas's missile silo and shut the missiles down. So there's a lot of things at play here that isn't just one thing or just in somebody's consciousness, because something physically acted upon a mechanical, electromechanical system, just like as it did with the tic tac and so forth. So there is a consciousness element, but that's not all there is. So
Yeah,
I hate to
absolutely.
pigeonhole, but all
No,
that
but I
said,
think that's right. I mean, listening to Nathan talk, and I'll shut up in a minute, but when listening to Nathan talk and other people, that's what enables us to advance on this topic, because it's very difficult. And Diana and Hoffman bringing out these tools and listening to Nathan talk, as I have done over time, and Exo and all the rest of it, it's really good to develop, to hone that. So I think it's a really good discussion to have, and I don't really know myself,
a
but I know
holistic
I've developed my
approach.
thinking. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I
A
agree with you,
whole
DJ.
Yeah, it's a holistic approach. There's so many things to consider. Exo's also, he's kind of in the same camp as I am. He likes to say it's not this or that, it's this and that. There's kind and benevolent intelligences, ones that are indifferent, ones that are malevolent, and that's what sort of makes sense in our model of human reality. All right, so we have a lot of questions to get to here, plus Deb. I want to go through the chat a little bit because people have been thoughtful to do that. Then we'll get to Deb, and then we'll get to Dan. Dan's questions. Dan, if you're watching and you're cooking, I hope it tastes good, whatever it is. All right, your brother Dan. All right, so I think we're right about here. Let's see, calling all beings. I think people's cognitive states are like I guess I should put this up on the screen, right, Nathan? That would make it easier. Are like a preloaded program running throughout their mind. When NHI entity projects into that person's mind, they see it through that lens. You know what? That's deep, man. Kane, what's
That's
up,
a good
man?
one. So the way I think about that question is that we sort of have habits of thought, right? So our personalities have in some ways, a predisposition towards habitual ways of thinking about the world. And if you've met anyone with a different personality than your own, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're like, why are they like this? That they're stuck in this kind of whirlpool of looking at the world in a certain way, and you think to yourself, why can't they just take a different perspective? And that's because there's a force of habit there, and we all know that habits, if you create a good habit, it can have a force of its own. It can be a force amplifier to what you do. So in the same way, I think personalities and ways of thinking are kind of habitual, to use their phrase, kind of preloaded programs running within your own mind. These are ways of thinking that we are predisposed to. So in terms of how the others or NHI or whatever may intersect with those habits of thinking, I do believe that because we are all connected at a fundamental level, at a sort of root level of consciousness, that just like a whirlpool on the surface of water is a habituation of that water. You're looking at the whirlpool; it's doing its swirling thing. We call it a whirlpool, but it's the same water as the water that's downstream that's just flowing over rocks, right? So if our habituated way of thinking is one whirlpool, and if an NHI is another sort of habituated way of being is another whirlpool, and if these two things intersect, if they kind of cross paths, what you'll state of the water emerge. You'll see some overlapping, you'll see some amplification of some of those waves, you'll see some diminishing of some of those waves. The two whirlpools, because they are again strongly habituated, will still remain as what they are, but they are changed by that intersection. And so we often talk about how the NHI is affecting us, but I also wonder how we are affecting them. And that's a part of this whole phenomenon that we really kind of don't know anything about. But any relationship that you've ever had, that in a relationship, that whole exchange means that you each are changing in that development, in that interchange of experience. And so I think, while yes, their ways of thinking, their habituated way of being, it can have a very strong effect on our expression of our consciousness. Also, our consciousness affects how they are. And so, maybe they do impart some of their way of looking at things onto our own way of seeing. Maybe they interrupt our way of seeing in such a way that it is, we would call it control, but it's really just intersection of their sort of mentation along with ours. But again, I'm just immensely curious, like, what are we doing
Yeah.
to them, and what will happen if this continues to sort of unfold, and reality as we know it continues to change, and these others become more involved in the world in a more overt way. How will they be changed in the interchange of that relationship? I'm very curious about that.
That is a fascinating question,
Yeah.
because that could in turn have second order effects on us again. So, all right. So, first of all, is that Jason Franklin? Thank you so much. Love you too. Thank you for coming and joining us. We're always happy to meet new folks. Great show, people. Okay, this is no question. People demand an Ask Deb episode. Deb, are you next up in the
Absolutely.
seat?
Yes,
Yes.
I could do that. I could talk about the
Okay.
research.
Okay, so the next one of these that we do will be Ask Deb. I actually asked, some of my fans, would you like to and ask DJ? They said no, thank you.
Perish the thought, DJ. Anybody would say
I
such
know. I'm
things.
kidding. I'm kidding. Nobody needs to be that bored for an hour and a half.
Please.
All right. So let's see. Lisa Bowden. Hello, Lisa. Hey, Vinny. What's going on, Vinny? So I don't know if that means Vinny. Vinny just signaled me, so I don't know if that means if he saw his intro. Here we go. Lisa, thank you. Have you ever heard of a gift or sign being left from an ET or spiritual being? It happened to him. Oh, this is almost like a Bigfoot thing. So, this actually, Nathan and then Deb could take this one, right?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
have not experienced something to that effect. At least nothing that I thought, where did this come from? It was left from some other, being that, wasn't a human or whatever, or like in a port or something like that. I've not had that experience. So I think it'd be incredibly cool, maybe even a little bit terrifying, but yeah, I haven't personally experienced that. I would wonder though if Deb has. I'm sure she's had some pretty neat experiences.
I have, although the one that I'm thinking of, I probably won't talk about, but I will say that
Sorry.
this is something that has happened, and the first thing that came to mind was the alien pancakes. I mean, like, what
Yes.
what better gift is there than them actually
Mhm.
making you breakfast, right? Like, that's
Mhm.
an older story, but like, some people say that the gift that they get is the increased psi abilities that come after the encounter, the increased premonitions and so on. But there have been like experiences that people have had with material items. And I think when you hear about what happened with those coins and the apparition that happened when we talked to the paranormal rangers, that kind of sounded like a gift. Like, why else would it be coins? If it wasn't a gift, it could be something that no one would want, but it was money. So that
That's a
occurred to me.
great, Deb. That's a great. So, coin exchange. Check out Stan Milbrook, the paranormal ranger. He may exchange coins with you if you're a numismatic type of person. Maybe he's got something that you'd like to trade. All right. So, um, yeah, Lisa, tell us either in the chat or via DM what was the gift and the situation that you experienced. Either if it's appropriate here, or you could DM myself or one of us. I would love to hear about how the gifting unfolded, what it was, and all that, and if there was some sort of an exchange between you and that intelligence. All right, let's go. You want to go with Dan Warren's question now, or Deb? Do you want to go now, and then we do Dan?
Yeah, I could do one of mine.
Okay, yeah,
So
please.
the one that I really want to know the most, I've decided to prioritize, is not a big philosophical question. It's because you had recently mentioned that you have had some of your own experiences now that you've been exploring. I was wondering if you wanted to share anything about that.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So earlier this year, I had an experience, kind of an altered state experience, something that I had not done before, and I was anxious about kind of going into that because I wasn't quite sure, what I would experience with it, and I won't. I'm leaving out some details just because I don't want to share the whole story,
Protect
but
the innocent.
I did have a chance to kind of experience something very special with a close friend of mine, and going into that experience, I tried to set some intention in advance. I tried to sort of say that no matter what happens in this experience that I don't know, is kind of unknown for me, it will be good. It will be a teaching moment. I will come out of it better than I went into it. And, I had a lot of amazing sort of, uh, I don't know how best to describe it, but kind of insights, I would put it that way, during the experience about reality and about the world. One particular insight that was profound for me was that, and I've mentioned this on some other shows, but that it relates to knowledge and how we know things. And what felt real to me in that experience was that the way that we know things is more intuitive, experiential than it is sort of linear and taught. So we're typically trained to think of learning as very tutelary, like I'm giving you this information and you're processing the information and you're coming to a conclusion and then you're learning the material. Whereas in this experience for me, it was clearer to me that learning, that knowledge was actually almost like a field around us at all times. It was something akin to what you read about or hear about when people talk about their out of body experiences or near death experiences, that when they have these experiences, they can think about something and they instantly know it. So it felt that way to me as well, that information was almost like like the air around me, and that if I wanted to know something, I could just sort of tap into that and it would be made present to me. So that was something that was very impactful. But the other thing that was really a big deal for me in that experience, that really kind of surprised me quite a bit, was while I was going through that experience, I had this thought kind of arise in my mind about my graduate school. And this is not something I think about pretty much at all. I've been out of grad school now for almost 20 years. So I don't think about them. I'm not an alumni that gives money to the school. I don't really interact with a lot of my former classmates. So it's not something that's top of mind. For whatever reason, in this experience, I thought to myself, I wonder what's going on with my graduate school, and I think it would be interesting to go back there and just, I don't know, check in on it. And for those who don't know, I went to seminary for a graduate degree. So, this is a religious institution where they're talking about theology and talking about, God and all this kind of stuff all the time. So I was like, it'd be interesting to go back there now with the kind of experiences that I have, and what would that be like? So when I kind of come out of the experience and I'm like coming back to normal reality, and I take a look at my phone like anybody would, I'm just like checking up on my notifications, and I look at my email inbox. And by the way, I'm one of these email people that's like, there's no unread email in my inbox. Like I know what's in my inbox. I'm constantly clearing stuff out. The things that aren't unread are things that I have to do. So that's like a very small list of things that are unread. So I'm looking at my email. The very first email that pops up is from my graduate school. And it's like, we want to check in with you, a class of so and so. We're curious, like, what's going on with you. We want you to respond to this survey. We just want to hear what you're doing and what's happening in your life. And I was like, well, I'm going to fill out the survey. So I did, and I haven't heard back from them. But the connection there between that sort of precognitive, which I believe it really was precognitive experience, and the email itself happening, like, was incredibly profound, and in some ways like dovetails with what I said before about knowledge and information. that if reality and consciousness is not really local, and if time is not necessarily linear, then we can tap into information as a field around us and learn things about reality, even if we aren't necessarily right next to it. And so I feel like that's validated from a lot of other experiences that we hear about and with the phenomena, which we could go into. But yeah, that was a big moment for me.
Wow.
Can I chime
Deb,
in on that?
Yeah, please. That was a banger, man. Great question.
Right. I just have to say I truly appreciate that you mentioned that, because I was saying to someone that sometimes when I'm like listening to people speak another language, I get this feeling that I should know it. That I'm like one really close veil between knowing it and not knowing it. And it's sometimes there's other moments in my life where there's just information I just feel like I already knew, and I was reading about something I already knew. It's a strange feeling. So I've also heard about that in NDEs, like that knowing is just something that like all things are already known. We've heard about the Akashic records, all things are in a library, and it's just a matter of accessing the information. So it's great that you had that experience.
Yeah, I mean, it also links to that idea of that non-local time again, as you mentioned, Nathan, this idea that everything exists at a sub-level that's ever happened. It's all there coexisting. And that's how, remote viewing works. That's how we get these precognition things or these synchron. And the interesting, I think it's really interesting that to come at it from that. And also the idea of ideas, we develop them socially as well. And that was interesting what you were saying about the others earlier. And if our thinking intersects with them, how would that create ripples in that that experience as well? And we start to connect with them. Anyway, I think that's it's fascinating how it links in with that.
Great. Deb, whoever does have the best question size voted by Nathan will win a can of DJ skincare formula. I think Dave is probably using it to lube the tracks on his garage door and at the house. But
how did you know the garage door's knackered?
Or the car door. All right. Let's get to Dan Warren's question, Money Nathan.
Sure.
And then we can move on. And then I might even get a question in here.
Please, yeah.
All right. Let's see. I just put it up on my notepad here. Okay. The question is, pardon me, I might even have to get me glasses, mate. Okay. What verse or event in the Bible does Nathan think is attributable to the phenomenon, but was interpreted as an act of God?
Oh, wow. Dan.
Look at Dan Money.
Rascal,
your brother, Dave.
So I'm going to disappoint you a little bit, but I'm also going to try to answer the question. So I don't have a specific verse that I can, pull out to provide an answer to this question. I do want to talk a little bit about the commonly used one that you'll hear thrown around in the community, and that's about Ezekiel and Ezekiel's wheel, and how that's clearly a UFO in the Bible, right?
It's also the bread in Whole Foods. They have that whole line of Ezekiel bread.
Yeah, very, very hearty and healthy. So, and interestingly enough, too, on the subject of the Bible, I just recorded a podcast with our good friend Matt Knapp of Bigfoot Crossroads, where he was asking me questions about the Nephilim, and the Nephilim come up sometimes in conversation about the phenomena. They come up in conversation about Bigfoot. So Matt will release that episode, and we talk a lot about biblical perspective on that idea. So I say all that to say that the Bible is really familiar to us, even though we don't realize it. So the world that we live in today is heavily, heavily influenced by Christendom and by these ideas that are rooted in the Bible. Most of us couldn't quote a passage, or if we were to try, we would kind of bumble one really poorly. Or sometimes we might quote something and be like, that's from the Bible, and it's actually William Shakespeare or something like that. So we have this,
or Dave Smathers,
exactly,
one or the other.
Maybe Dave Smathers. So we have this sense in which there's profound things come out of this text, and And as we learn profound things about our world, there is a connection point to the Bible directly. So, we're always, I mean, look, when I was growing up, it was all about the book of Revelation. And it was like, what does the book of Revelation mean? What are the things in modern day reality that we can look at and find in the book of Revelation? People would talk about helicopters being in the book of Revelation and tanks being in the book of, all these different perspectives. And that's because we want there to be this through line between that profound material that influence so much of our culture and what we're experiencing in our current time. And if we can make a link between those two things, there's a kind of like degree of control and power that we are essentially like calling forth like magic by being able to do that. That we're creating our own like meta narrative by stringing these things together, and that gives us a degree of control and mastery over a very confusing experience that we call the waking life, right? The world around us. So it's a very long, kind of back story there to answering Dan's question. But the one thing that I have been thinking a lot about, to be honest with you, about the Bible, is this phrase that you'll see come up from time to time where God is referenced as, I am, that I am that I am. It's very like enigmatic way of talking about the divine. And I'm thinking to myself, if I'm saying that, I am that I am. I am that I am. We typically, like, when we're looking at it on the page and in the Bible, we're thinking that's God saying this, right? But I'm reading it, I, me. I am
Yeah.
saying it, I, me. What does it mean for me to say it? I think for me, it means there is, coming back to things Dave was touching on, there's this element of the divine in all of us that seeing I am in the text, being one with this material, being one with these concepts. And I don't just mean Christianity, but I mean these deeper movements of the human conscious experience throughout history that we have recorded in our religious texts, in our literature, in our art, I mean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I am that I am. I am experiencing this as if I were that. There is no separation. So that's what I think about with the phenomena in the Bible. That's what I've been thinking about a lot lately. I'll have to get back to Dan on a very specific one, but hopefully I addressed a little bit of his question there.
And it's an interesting time for you to take this question, Nathan, as you rediscover part of yourself that you had put away for a while. And now you're seeing that it's another way for you not only to connect with the phenomenon, but maybe and understanding the phenomenon and another prism with which to see the phenomenon, but also a way for you to connect with people to also maybe open their mind about the phenomenon. So it's an interesting time for that question.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the idea of synchronicity is one
Back
of
to the
those
police.
things. Yeah, he's one of those things, but all the examples I was talking about and all the rest of it about what is reality, what isn't. That synchronicity one is very hard to place and to explain what it means in the context of everything I was saying. Very, very difficult. And as Gary Nolan says, often it's those sort of questions that maybe give you the in. And I was just thinking then, as you were talking about that synchronicity there that Nathan talks about and a few others, that is quite an exceptional thing, or not what Nathan was saying, but the general idea of synchronicity and that it's real I think may be a very interesting special case that's worth us looking at. Maybe think about it. And I really love that biblical thing you were saying, Nathan. I really got what you meant there. Anyway.
No, that's great. And for a good conversation on that synchronicity topic that I think is really profound is the conversation that Darren had with Bernardo Kastrup on Point of Convergence. So that interview, they talk about synchronicity and the role that it plays in reality. And if you haven't listened to it, go check it out because it's really, really great.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I would kind of like, excuse me, my voice is crap tonight. But if you think about that James Madden conversation with Diana Pasulka, which is brilliant on UFO Rabbit Hole, this is akin to that discussion, because Darren, as great a speaker as Darren is, one of the things that is very underrated that people don't talk about is what an active listener he is. He is as good a listener as he is a speaker, because were he not, he wouldn't have really gotten the concepts that Bernardo Kastrup was laying down. So I recommend you guys go to that show. It's Point of Convergence. The one I think maybe the only episode Darren's ever done on there, and listen to that. He's also Nathan's co-host on Liminal Frames, a show that has had a slow burn that's a damn inferno at this point. So yeah. Nathan, so guess what? I get to ask a question now.
Love it. Bring it.
So as you know, Nathan, there's so many different ways to look at the phenomenon and how it's affecting humanity spread across the globe. And I found, I have these other questions for you, but I wanted to hit this one up because it was topical on my mind with regard to the David Paulides phenomenon. Obviously, you watched that. What's the name of that, Debs? That movie with David Paulides, the UFO Connection, I believe.
Yeah,
Is that right?
Oh,
Yeah,
you're
it's,
gonna
Hopefully
be.
we all
missing
saw
four,
that.
it's missing 411,
The recent one, right?
a UFO connection.
Yes, that's it.
Thank you, David. Yes. So, Nathan, there's some of these things that are super inexplicable in terms of people. Well, the young boy from Oregon, which was pre that movie, it was in the missing 411 without a tagline on it, where that 3-year-old boy was 9 miles away from his house in winter. They got Les Stroud to make that trek during the daytime. And I can't remember how many hours it took him, and he felt that he would have not been able to make that at night, the way that the little boy did. And then they found him face down in the ice, and he was alive. Nathan, what is your interpretation of these events? And if you can conjure some sort of an explanation that you think would explain these circumstances, and we could go into a couple of them, but I'd like to just get your initial take on that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to steal a word from the chat. Duncan says that some of those Paulides episodes are staggering, and I think that he's right on. They kind of take your breath away when you hear some of these accounts, particularly what you described, covering all that distance and how it is difficult for an experienced person like Les Stroud to do that. There are a lot of stories in human history about people getting lost and then being found, both literally and metaphorically, right? Coming back to some Christian stuff I just talked about. But there's a lot of conversation in fairy literature, for example, people disappearing into kind of fairyland and then coming back. And like all this time has passed, and they don't think any time has passed. And so this is a part of the human experience, and it also falls into that fringe experience that we have a difficult time making sense of. I honestly don't know what to think about it, other than it is disturbing. It's disturbing how this can happen. It's one of those things that interrupts the feeling of safety that you have about the world, that you know the world, that it is an ordered place. We are so used to the fact that we live in an ordered space. We've created these buildings, we've created, clothing, we've created vehicles and ways of moving through the world on roads, and very, like everything is very orchestrated,
manicured, and
yes, we've done our very best to tame what is wild at its core. And every once in a while, the wild intersects with our life. And those are the moments that really sort of almost like that first sort of jolting break after a coma, where you kind of come out of this and you're like, what happened to me? It's like that, because it interrupts your feeling of normalcy. And I think that that's what these experiences, these missing experiences do. That's the effect that they have on people. I really don't know what it's about. We could certainly postulate some sinister forces there. We could postulate some phenomenological, NHIs or whatever they may be. I just don't know. I don't have enough information. And I actually feel that sense of frustration from David Paulides, that he's done an excellent job of like compiling these events and stories and kind of collating them and saying, here are things that they share in common. But you can feel like this deep frustration within him that like, but what is causing it? It remains very mysterious. It's frustrating.
I think he's refusing to. I don't think that he wants to talk about what he thinks it is. I think he wants to leave it open and remain. And I think with good reason. I don't think you can pin it on one thing. And I also, to our audience out here, I don't want to appear as a guy who has a UFO show who says everything is a UFO, or a person who has a Bigfoot show that every noise in the woods is Bigfoot, and every structure of trees falling is the result of Bigfoot. But what I do want to say, after spending, I don't know, the last 3 or 4 days, and there's two things I want to pimp. One thing I want to talk about real quickly before I finish this sentence is Nathan on Bigfoot Crossroads. Matt Knapp is a member of the Cab family. He is a phenomenal interviewer. And when I heard that he was going to have Nathan on, I was even more excited than when I went on his show. So, because I'm just fascinated to hear what they talk about. And as Nathan kind of thankfully has joined me in this Bigfoot quest for understanding about the Bigfoot and Sasquatch creature and the phenomenon that surrounds it, if whatever that may be. So Bigfoot Crossroads, check that out. Secondly, so again, I don't want to be the guy that's crying wolf, but in listening to David for the past 3 days, and I would encourage you, and his YouTube, he gets into a lot of ancillary things. It's set up very differently than when you hear him on Coast to Coast. I would go, if you want the definitive Paulides stories with George Norrie or George Knapp, ask him questions one after another, and they'll discuss, and then they'll do another case and another case, another case. Go to the Coast to Coast on YouTube and watch that. You're going to get more of the cases, and then you can go and follow up with his books. There are certain ways where you're out hiking, and Dave, if you would, I don't know if you hike in the UK, but just kind of, let's say you have a line of 5 or 6 of your family members. Someone is tailing Charlie. It's not an adult, but you turn around, you see them, you stop, you drink your canteens, and the next thing you know, you walk off from the area where you're having a drink, and that person is gone and never found. And you can, and there's no sound, and there's no scream. And then when we bring in the idea of the dogs coming out, they bring out these bloodhound type dogs that you put an article of clothing and they'll go for 5 miles if that person was walking or drugged, and the dogs will lay down and say, I don't smell anything. They lay down, and it's very frustrating for the SAR personnel. And so when you put it together that there's no sound, they're not found, the dogs can't find him, the helicopters with the IR and the NVGs can't find any trace of them, you have to think about that the phenomenon took them. He also said something very interesting that I want to say to you guys, that George Norrie asked him. And he asked him about why isn't happening in I can't remember the exact question, but I remember Dave's answer, and it's more important than what the question is. The answer was, there is intent here, because if it were a portal, because I think that's what George Norrie asked him, would these people just walk through a portal and then disappear? And he said no, because if it was he's not saying it's not a portal, but there's intent to get that person alone, even only if for a second, and they're gone. Whereas why doesn't the portal open in front of the 4 or 5, or someone from a church group he talked about at Yosemite walking to a waterfall there that hundreds of people go every day, and the person who was last in that church group never seen again. So you think that whatever it is has an intent, and it gets them alone and then takes them. And that's what makes me think about the abduction phenomenon. And that's why Yosemite doesn't release these statistics, to his chagrin. And I think it's what the government doesn't want to talk about. Nathan.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly troubling, right? And the number of missing people is very, very high, particularly in these national parks, and it's disturbing. Now, the national parks are huge, okay? So let's remind folks that they're talking about a lot of wilderness here. That is, there are no roads, there are no buildings. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there, but agree, some of these circumstances are incredibly strange, um, baffling even the most skilled search and rescue personnel. And so, I think beyond the mere, oddity of it is the hole that it literally leaves in the lives of everyone who experience it. Because not only do you have a person that you've lost, that you can't replace the person, but you don't even have an explanation. So it's like a double loss, there. You just don't know. And it probably eats away at you, for the rest of your life. Where are these people going? I don't know. And I don't know. I hope we do find out. And I hope most of them are okay. I hope they don't just like get taken and are, abused, or they die alone, or, all those things that we would hate someone to experience.
I think it's and we can go to, we're going to come to you, Dave, and Debs on this as well. And Lisa, I think it's not talked about more because I think there may be a connection here to why there is a government cover up on this, is because a lot of these that could be attributable to abduction, which would explain why somebody like Terry Lovelace, who ended up becoming assistant U.S. attorney, says, when I was aboard this craft, there were families and children and so forth. I mean, that explains that kind of a thing, and so that could be an issue. Dave, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, I'm interested in the crypto-terrestrial thing. I've done quite a bit of work on it, but there is quite a lot of mileage in the profile in terms of where they allegedly live, in isolated areas, the sort of tech they've got, cloaking tech, all that sort of stuff. And as Nathan said, historical things about taking people generally, changelings, taking people away. And one of the theories is that it's to improve the sort of genetic stock we've got and all the rest of it, without sounding too eugenic about it, but that is the scenario. So I think there is a lot of mileage in that. I think, to Lisa's point, people, I think it's a bit like the abduction phenomenon, isn't it? It's very hard for us to control it, and we don't want to talk about it. I think the government doesn't want to freak people out. We may find at the end of this whole thing, but there's been a lot of things the government's been sitting on, they just do not want to freak people out about, really. And I think the last thing I'd say, the lesson of Grush is when you get a good profile of a witness and they tell you stuff, there's a good chance they're telling the truth, because and we see it a lot. And I know that's Grush's UAPs and all the rest of it, but I think it was a more general lesson about when you're hearing a lot of that. And I think that about the abduction stuff all the time, there's too many things that are being said. Back to Pallades, there is a bit of a profile he's got on people with certain, I think, Germanic things and other different types, different things. It's not all that, but it's different, which would imply there's some sort of method as well in terms of the people that are being selected, which would imply something genetic, or it might be something different. I don't know. As I say, I don't particularly get it. But anyway, so I think it's a really interesting, but I think the fear factor, the authorities are probably that wouldn't want to say, because nobody would go anywhere. A bit like what you were saying, DJ, they shut down the national parks. I think more profound than that, though. I know.
I think that's a thought, but I think it's if they think that there's this abduction thing that people are literally plucked. There's just no way you can explain it. I mean, some of these areas, some of those, Nathan, those abductions, I guess there's some valley where I guess you could see it from the ranger station in the lodge, where people will trek, and that's the sort of front part of the park. He said there've been hundreds of people disappear right from there. He talked about it. You really
Crazy.
got to listen to some of it, but I'm gonna have to step away from the show for a second. Nathan, if you would take over, and I know you have some questions in our private chat that people have DM'd to you before we go back to Dave, because I know he's got something more, and I'm sure Deb has as well. I'll be right back.
To be honest, DJ, I've got a few ones, but I've asked my main stuff. I think Deb should give us some of her stuff as well, because I've monopolised the time quite a lot.
Actually, I did want to comment on this one. So I had looked into mythology in Korea recently because, I find there's patterns that we're missing because we don't look at other countries as often. For instance, all the countries in Africa have common characteristics with stories that we hear in Australia. Like not, all the stories, but there's things like the rainbow serpent. And one of the ones that is something that we have seen is sort of like that Rip Van Winkle story. There was an island in Korea where there's a site that was part of a legend where fishermen would disappear, that they would go visit the gods. So I find it interesting how often this idea of being disappeared and hopefully coming back becomes part of our stories. Just something to throw in there. Like if you look in mythology, it'll come up over and over.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, human history, like it's almost a miracle that we're here, right? At all. So surviving the brutal, conditions of the earth, and being able to thrive and dominate the entire planet and have the culture and civilization that we've created. I mean, these are mind-blowing things in and of themselves, and all of the lives lost between that very first spark of consciousness in our lineage to where we are now. I mean, it leaves a hole, right? We could talk about this psychologically. It's left a psychological hole on us as a species. Not even just within our specific species, but within our human family, right? There are human beings, other types of humans that don't exist anymore because we outpopulated them, outnumbered them. And a lot of our, I think, lore and mythology hints at those other relatives, right? We've got some that are mentioned to be incredibly strong or taller than we are, or some that were very small. I heard once a story that, again, totally speculation, but Tolkien sort of took his entire Middle Earth world from some sort of text that he stumbled across in the basement of a library that hinted that in ancient Europe, like there were all these different kinds of people, like dwarves and hobbits and giants and things like that. And he just sort of brought that into his own story. I don't know, the truthfulness of it, but I do know that there's a big part of the human story that we don't know. And if you look at all of the histories, like the mythologies, the religious histories of humanity, they're all wrestling with this missing piece. They're all trying to fill in those gaps about what happened. And in many ways, we're still dealing with the downstream effects of that ancient past that we don't understand. But there's like an imprint that it has left on us. And I think the phenomena is in some way actually related to it. So yeah, it's very fascinating stuff.
And so in the chat, Heiser's asking, it's going on regardless. Why does them telling us have to do with anything? The reason is what she's asking is because if this is going on, why, first of all, why won't they give Dave Pilates the numbers on how many people? He said far and away that Yosemite National Park, there are more people that have gone missing there than any other national park. And why won't they give him the statistics? Why are they playing hardball? Second of all, would be if there's an issue, it's this, you could say the same with the government, with the UFO phenomenon. We could say the same with the Bigfoot phenomenon. Why is the government not sharing what it knows about us and giving people tips on what to do, what not to do, safety tips, all those sorts of things? So that's why that question is asked, is why why isn't there more transparency? And it relates to several different phenomenon. Nathan, what do we got in the chat for you from, I think you got these from Twitter.
Yes, I've got a few questions from Andrew, and I've got one question from Jonathan Milgie, who's in the chat, I know for sure. So let me get some of
Jonathan.
these from Andrew, because he posted quite a few. I don't know if we get to all of them, but his first question is, why hasn't Ross Coulthart tracked down and interviewed Tyler D, aka Tim Taylor from Diana's stories? Well, I don't know. I'm not Ross Coulthart, and I don't have a very close relationship with him, so I would be just as curious as anyone, what's going on there. And we know Ross has sources that he has not revealed. So for all I know, Tim Taylor could even be one of Ross's sources. I really have no idea. Would I love to see that interview? Absolutely. And would everybody in the community love to see that interview? You betcha. So
why would you want to see that interview, if I can interject?
Well, I mean, in part because Diana has created this mythical person. She's given him a pseudonym. He's like this central character in a couple of her stories, and basically inflated the role that he's played in the secret keeping and the history of the phenomena within the United States, and particularly the space program. So yeah, I mean, everyone's like, what does he know, and what are the secrets, and how can we pry more information out of him? I think that the community would be very interested in that.
Do you know when you were talking about the cave with Diana Pasulka, Nathan?
Yes.
You made that thing about the jailers. Who are the jailers, Diana? And I think he's very much presented as potentially one of the jailers, or somebody who knows more at any rate, who's betwixt and between the two. And that's what I find so fascinating about him. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of other conversation related to that is this notion that there are, and she hints at this pretty strongly in her stories, there are these kind of elite secret keepers who have a picture of themselves that is at and above the rest of everybody else, and even that hierarchy that she talks about in Encounters. I mean, I can't even believe that was printed. That there's this way of looking at the rest of us as below the intelligence agencies and things like that. So it's troubling, and I think a lot of people want to know who those people are, why they think the way they think. Are there some literal truths to these ancient bloodlines that have been rumored, through history? This gets very, very quickly into some murky water. It's a hot potato, so I'm hesitant to kind of talk about that too much, because you can start getting into some pretty scary territory there. So I'm going to move on past that one, and to Andrew's next question, and then I want to take the one from Jonathan. So he's asking about what's up with the time traveler angle. I mean, time travel, for those of you who don't know, is the sort of angle proposed by Dr. Michael Masters, who we've had on our show, who we're having back on our show in the early part of next year. So super excited to have Mike back with us to talk about his extra tempestrial model and
his experience.
Yeah, and his experience, exactly. And this is one of those things that I think really will get your head, spinning. The fact that these beings, particularly like the grays that have been seen in experiences and encounters, could very well be future us. I had a hard time with this theory, to be honest with you, initially, because I think I'm like biased against time travel hypotheses just from growing up with all these sort of time travel shows and movies, and I always hated them because I thought they just sort of took a cheap exit. So I had a hard time like getting along with that, but I'm coming around to it, particularly with if you're buying into this notion that time isn't linear, that space-time isn't real. Time travel could very well be a part of just manipulating reality, like we can fly an airplane. And once you can enter into a relationship with reality that involves inserting into time, all kinds of things become possible. So it's very interesting. And in particular, too, I find that a lot of the abduction experiences, the accounts of the beings taking things from people or coming back to visit people over and over again, Like, it sounds like something humans would do. Like, oh crap, we messed up and we've got to go fix this. Oh, you know what? We tried to fix it, but we didn't do a good job fixing it. We're going to have to try again to fix it. And we just sort of keep trying. Like, this is such a human thing, right? How many times where you dig that hole for yourself to try to dig your way out of a problem until you realize like you're just making it worse. And it strikes me that like that's, I don't know, pretty prevalent within a lot of these stories. So could be this aspect of who we are, whether it's literal time travelers or kind of related to our subconscious. I'm not quite sure, but I love it. I love that one. Let me get this question from Jonathan, and then we'll just open it up to whatever's left. So, Jonathan, let me see if I can find it here. He asks, "What's in store for 2024? Anything you're particularly looking forward to?" Okay, that's a big one. All right. Well, 2024
kicking DJ off the show is one.
Yeah, first order of business. Boom. No, I think 2024 will be interesting. And I hate that people are just like, trust me, and the hype and all this kind of stuff. I get it. It's exhausting. And we've been saying it every year since people started doing more podcasts about this. So I get it. There's fatigue, real fatigue. And for whatever reason, we're not good at waiting months or years to figure out the answers to something that's been happening for all of human history. I get it, folks. We're impatient, but I do think there is clear momentum in this area, and I see it in my own life. Look, I have had conversations with people in my family that I thought would be like, I thought they would think I had lost it. But the fact that they're willing to talk to me about this stuff, that they're interested in it, that they don't, look over their shoulder before they want to ask me a question about it, that tells me we are entering new territory here. And we're seeing this being talked about on our mainstream media news in serious tones. I think that's going to continue happening. I think we're going to see some additional folks come forward because they have been and are emboldened by what has already taken place, from the folks of David Grush, from him kind of paving the way and kind of taking the hero's path there. We're going to see other folks come forward. What are we going to learn? I don't really know. And, if you followed our show or any other conversations I've had about disclosure, you'll know I'm kind of, I'm not necessarily pro disclosure in the government sense. I'm not quite sure we're going to get that, grand statement from the president. We might. And quite frankly, if we do, that is almost more alarming to me than if we don't. Because if they're coming forward to explain this stuff in a way that is, halfway coherent, I almost think that they're going to do it because they have to. And why do they have to? I don't know. We can speculate, but it might not be great. I'm not sure. So I don't know. 2024, it should be really interesting. I try not to think too much about that, though. I try to think about how I can just be more present, right now, because I just like the rest of us, I get caught up in like the fanfare and the excitement. But if I do too much of that, then I lose sight of like what's happening just here now around me with my kids, my family, etc. And I want to be present to them because I can't get these moments back.
Yeah, after hearing that, your thoughts about time travel, I'm thinking Nathan may have like a Michael J. Fox dartboard at his house or the DeLorean. And I was also thinking to send him a song from like Amazon Music, Time Passages from Al Stewart. So Time Passages. You remember that one, right, Dave?
Oh, yes.
All right.
Love it.
By the way, Dave, where were you when you wrote Penny Lane?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was sitting in Strawberry Fields, DJ. Yeah.
All right. We got about 15 minutes left. So what I want to do is make these quick questions and quick answers so that we can get them in here. Yep. What do we have in the chat? Do we have some questions in the
Well, this one has only been asked to me one time, so I'd be curious to answer this one.
Please.
So the only person to ever ask me about what my Twitter handle, where that name comes from, is our dear friend James Eindoli. So found that interesting. I'm a total nerd, so I came up with this one just because I had two theories that I was really, or ideas I was really interested in. And I thought, how do I combine these two acronyms into one anagram? All right, so my name handle is an anagram of 2 acronyms, and those acronyms are we living in a simulation? So AWLIAS
No.
and UFO. Right? So combine UFO with are we living in a simulation, and you can create this
Brilliant.
word. So that's where it came from. I'm less kind of pro simulation hypothesis, other than to say that like our reality is simulated, like we are simulating it all the time. But I'm not quite so sure that it's we're living in a computed simulation in the classical sense of the hypothesis. I'm willing to entertain the idea that it's possible. I just don't lean in that particular direction.
Nathan right here, Anon ET. First of all, hello, Anon ET. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us again. The Rendlesham witnesses felt that what they encountered were us 500,000 years from the future, glowing white beings. So, I think when not Dave, when Mike starts to put these things together and he talks about declining birth rates, which are down, what do you say, 40% worldwide or something, staggering like that, actually. And he talks about that and how people that have seen the Greys describe something that is more, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't have a pronounced, genitalia and all these sorts of things. That possibly that is why they're taking biological material. The witness from the Dave Paulides movie said that when he was taken up in a craft and they took a look at him and said, we can't use you, and it's because he had a vasectomy. But anyway, go ahead, Nathan, please.
Yeah, well, okay, so first of all, how do we know how far advanced anything is, right? So whether that's what's so difficult about these encounters, because for all we know, in 10 years, we could be doing a lot of the things that are purported to be possible in some of these encounters. We don't know the kind of immense power that we might be unlocking through artificial intelligence. We may, in fact, even encounter another being that basically levels our whole civilization up in ways that we can't even imagine. That may happen incredibly rapidly. So, kind of putting a number on it for me is really challenging, because it's just too difficult to, postulate out what we would look like in 100 years, right? I mean, who would have thought from the 1900s or the late 1800s to the early 2000s we'd be where we are? I mean, nobody would ever think we'd be where we are now in that short span of a time. So it's very possible that technological change will only be faster and faster. I don't know. It's certainly, like, I like the idea that we would basically like become post-biological. We would be, maybe energy beings of some kind. So that, is a possibility. But I don't know. What I do like to think about, though, when we're talking about this, is like there's a very human, like there's a kinship to the encounter, right? We're not encountering something that's so strange to us that we're like, well, this isn't human, or there's nothing I can connect it to. It feels like it's part of us, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the bell curve, it was 130,000 years to achieve powered flight from early humanity, but then in 66 years, it went from the Wright brothers to stepping on the moon. So there's the curve is trending steeply upward. So we'll see.
I mean, there's an interesting
what
one.
happens.
Could come. One thing that isn't considered, certainly not by Michael Masters, is that it could come from the past. With tech there, but he's a very traditional anthropologist, so he doesn't believe there was any earlier civ, and it's just his view.
Sure.
I'd just like a little comment on time travel, if I may.
Please.
I think that clearly, as Nathan said, it really fits the MO, all the things of how it behaves and all the rest of it. But I think if you look at either one, say the block universe thing that Michael Masters says, that i.e. everything's already happened, well, that's pointless then, isn't it? Why would you bother? you wouldn't even bother doing it, would you? Because it's already happened. So that's a massive hole in this theory for now. For me, and I've heard him try and dance around it, and he's really good at it, and he acknowledges it himself. So, there's no shade on him for that, but I think it's a massive hole in it. And secondly, the multiverse one, apart from the fact I don't find the multiverse credible, but that's pointless as well, because if you went back and changed it, then you wouldn't be going back to your own timeline, would you? You'd just be creating a different one. So it's fundamentally a pointless activity, time travel, in my view. So there you go. Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
There you go, masters. Let's see, you're not going to sell another book in Manchester.
I have my theory on it,
ahead, Debs.
which actually kind of relates to something Lou Elizondo was saying about cigars burning on both ends. Well, what if one end of the cigar is something that ends up on this planet and changes the DNA, and that DNA leads to a roadmap, which is our future, which leads to, like, the master's theory, and that's the other end of the cigar, right? So technically the beginning started the end. So in a way, it could still be future humans that came from our past.
I don't want to throw a wrench in your theory, but I don't think it was burning at both ends. I think he was saying that it's not burning exactly evenly. Somebody correct me on that if I'm wrong.
Yeah, the picture I know what you're talking about, Deb. I think it's the cigar, and it's like the cherry and the burn, and I don't know that it was both ends, but I definitely like what you're saying is good. I like what you're saying there. And
I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
A point I want to do kind of related to that, something that Danny Sheehan said in an interview, and he's been on tons of them, so I apologize, I can't remember where it came from. But when he said this, it just really jumped out at me. And he said something to the effect that the Earth is it wasn't the word that he used. I'm changing the word, but it was an incubator, or it was the Earth was the birthplace of life, essentially. And if you think about that a little bit more, and think about our knowledge of our history and how old the Earth actually is, and there's like an hypothesis called the Saurian hypothesis that talks about like an ancient civilization that maybe would have been like reptilian or whatever, and maybe it just died off. Will we even have any evidence of it anymore? And the general consensus is that no, we actually wouldn't be able to find any evidence of that, because the geological timescale is so large that it just basically be gone. My point there is that, we hear about all these hominid-looking species. What if they all came from the Earth, right? What if they all came from the Earth, but in different time periods, and not different dimensions, literally like just different time periods? And the Earth is essentially this birthing center for life in the universe. It's so rich with life. It gives rise to conscious life. And we're sort of part of the experiment. Like, we're one of those sentiences that have risen to a certain level, and just like these other beings have before us, and they've learned lessons along their journey, and we're learning lessons along ours, and they're intersecting with us in some ways to either like help us out or maybe bump us off the path. I'm not quite sure, but anyway, that stuck with me a lot as a kind of a profound thought experiment.
Nathan, do you think that sort of exclusivity infers that there isn't a similar planet elsewhere in the universe teeming with life as grand as Earth?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I don't want to be the only sort of, lushly populated world. I mean, there's life literally almost in every square inch of our planet, right? So I hope that we're not the only one that's doing that. But I also kind of think that there could be life at all kinds of places that we just don't know what it looks like. We only have our one sample size here. So every time we're looking for life like it is here. And we could be completely wrong. What if life like it is here is actually like the super rare kind of life, and most life is like totally different, and we literally can't see it if it were right in front of our face? So that's a possibility. And if that's true, there could be life literally in our own solar system. We literally don't know how to find it.
I can't get over
Andor
that.
looked I was gonna say Andor looked pretty nice, and the cute little Ewoks, and
Beautiful.
so
That'd be great. But I was going to say that I can't get over the fact that if we're going with the Big Bang Theory, everything was together in the beginning. So basically, we have cousins all over the universe, and
Hmm.
everything actually was pretty close to each other at the beginning when it slowly started moving apart, like it continues to do. So that some of those cousins were like ones we could visit, So I'm just saying, like
Yep.
everything was all the building blocks are all over the universe. The same Legos are all over the universe.
Yeah, just careful where you step, right?
Yes.
Um, those Legos
is there
hurt.
another Deb?
Probably.
There's gotta be.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean,
Well,
no one like our Deb, but
no,
similar.
not like ours, but
Yeah.
similar. All right, so folks, you are listening to Calling All Beings. That is Nathan on the screen. I am DJ. David Smethers joining us from Manchester. Debs. Julie is in the chat. Please make a comment on our YouTube or something, or a like or a subscribe or something if you would. We are on a whole bunch of podcast platforms. I think we're going to start a Facebook whereby we're going to have a chat, and some of these cabbies like myself and others, without naming who they might be, may pop up in that chat. So that's something we're considering, because I noticed I saw some good chats today from other shows that I like, both motorcycle related and a Bigfoot show that I really like. Brian King Sharp had a nice chat going there today. So maybe we're going to do that. So parting shots for Nathan, starting with David Smethurst.
Well, I mean, what I would say, Nathan, I've never heard you say a defensive word in my experience of watching you, which is, in my experience, a man who's in both command of his brief and in his responses. So that's one of the highest compliments I can give you, really. Fantastic. Really good. Excellent. I love listening to what you say on these things. And that was great. And kudos for answering all those questions that I asked, because I thought I wasn't doing it on purpose, but they were quite tough. They were tough to think of. So I thought you did a great job. But your lack of defensiveness is most impressive.
Thanks, Dave. I want to quickly say something before we finish, because Dave, you brought this up in your early comment, but I do think that reality is an interplay between things that are concrete and things which are unseen, imaginary, evolving, things that we know and things that which we hope for. There's this dance between those two realities that create reality itself. And that gets to your point about consciousness and objective reality. I think that these are two almost like poles that are required for the entire thing to work. So
Let's go around the horn real quick, and then Julie, jump in on this in the chat as well. Do you think? And so we'll start with Nathan, go Dave, Debs, and then Dave. There are some of these cryptids, we could say Dogman or some other cryptids that are out there. Do you think that people are manifesting these creatures into their reality, which may be apart from something like Bigfoot, where there's a very, very significant amount of evidence of the daytime, nighttime kids, females, not the least of which is Patty, etc. Whereas dogmen seem to appear, but you don't seem to see them with their young and so forth. So, Nathan, are some of these cryptids manifestations?
I mean, I think it's possible. I think that the human capability to manifest things is pretty powerful. I have no idea. So I'm going to leave a big question mark on that one. It's a frightening thought, though, that would be the case.
Debs, do you think that some people are manifesting some of these cryptids, or do you think they are just walking into their existence, just like they just happen upon them?
I'm going to say
happenstance?
no, they are not manifesting them. What they may be manifesting is their ability to see them. And my strongest point of why I say no is because I have not one time managed to manifest a unicorn, and I assure you I would have gotten one by now if we had that ability, because I put a lot of time and energy in that as a child, like wanting one to show up. And you don't hear about unicorn sightings. Like, that's not a thing, even though, like, Jacques Vallée told us about how unicorns did exist to help with farming or something back in the day. I just don't think that's the case. I think it's more likely that a veil is being removed or perception is being opened up. No unicorns, so no.
There's our friend Tim from All Things Unexplained is in the chat. How are you, Tim? No, I have not hiked Everest. Are you suggesting that we do that? Because we better start training now for about 24 months from now. Dave, do you think that? And by the way, Deb, I think Dave may have one in the stables, the unicorn that you seek. Do you believe that these cryptids are being manifest, Dave, or do you think that they're just walking into, people are happening upon them?
No, I at the risk, I don't want to be glib here because I don't know. Yeah, just to say.
Okay.
I think what they are is, I think the projections, with the exception of Bigfoot, because you convinced, I talked to you about that. I think the projections of the bit like the screen memories people get of abductions, you see owls and all the rest of it. I think these are projections. I think they potentially linked to crypto-terrestrials using whatever psychic stuff they got, and they project these creatures that aren't to these guys who's actually there. And that's why I think the majority of them are. I think it's a good case of that, the skinwalkers at the Pentagon, with those dog men smoking fags, cigarettes, and all the rest of it. So that's what I think they projected. But I wouldn't dismiss the ability to them be manifest by all the other things we've heard about. And I know with Bigfoot, there's a lot of physical evidence of long-term habitation, which you told me about, DJ. So I wouldn't want to say it's a coverall, but that's what my view of them is. I also think the more likely you see those creatures, the more near you are to a potential underground habitation of whatever it is. So that's my view, very specific.
No, thank you, Dave. There is that one story. I don't know which one of the folks at Skinwalker tells about this, but it was a big wolf-like creature that went and reached through the fence and grabbed one of these calves, and they shot at it several times. And it was only after, I think, the second volley that they got it to let loose. It didn't move or win. So when you see something like that, that's not a manifestation. So I'm just asking the question. I'm not making an assertion, but great answer. Let's get Julie in there. Julie, I think some do manifest them. I like the Philip experiment, but unintended. Like the Philip experiment, but unintended. I think some are likely poltergeist, which what Dave is talking about, outside, and others are beings that can manipulate our gross matter consciousness. Wow, Julie, library science over here. Jeez. I didn't read that as well as you wrote it. So the Philip experiment, I'm unfamiliar with that. We'll have to hear about that, but unintended.
That's the one in Canada in '73 where they manifested. I think it's he made up a false story and manifested this guy. I think
that's right.
Okay. Thank you, Jules, for another great take on this. Jules got a lot of experience with a lot of stuff. All right, that's all for tonight, folks. Thank you, Dave Smethurst. Where can people find you on Twitter if they want to engage with you in conversation?
Dave Smethurst 66. They can hear me obviously with Frank on UFO Thinker. Just give us a shout, and thanks for having me on, guys. I've really, really enjoyed it. So it's great.
It's our pleasure to have you on, Dave. Yeah, UFO Thinker, part of our CAB network. Frank has a great show. He and Dave, you want to get down into the legislation, condemnation, all isolation, indignation. It is all up on that show. So come and check out Frank. He has a monthly roundtable as well with Dave. And who are the other brothers? What's the name of their show? They do a great.
It's been slimmed down a bit. It's Ash. Greg's taking a bit of a sabbatical, but it's Ash and Greg from the Paranormal Podcast normally. So
Yes.
we're on with Ash, and
Yeah,
we have a couple of guest stars. We're going to get Davey Johnson on shortly. And Ash.
Can I get an amen?
That's
I
awesome.
haven't told Davey that yet, but I will be asking him.
Get Yorkshire. West Yorkshire.
Hey up, DJ. Dave wants us on. Come on, Ash, we get back on.
And I think it was Ash.
UFOs.
UFOs. I know that's how Dave said. Davey. But yeah, they Ash just had a big nice big pub event in the UK to get people together to talk about the phenomenon. I encourage everybody to do that and get your grassroots movement going in the UK, going and plan you a pub meetup like that. He's showing great leadership, in my opinion. So cheers to him. Nathan, any final words from you and Debs before we go?
Look, I've had a great time. Really glad to speak with you guys. Dave, great to have you with us. Always excellent questions and thoughts. This was fun, and I look forward to all the cool stuff we're going to do next year. We've been talking a lot about programming and how we're going to take the show in some different directions. So eager to get that going. Thank you to everybody that's shown up for the chat and posting questions, both in the chat and in social media. Really appreciate that. We're trying to grow that conversation in the chat group, and you guys are the best base of folks to grow it on top of. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Julie. Yes. Debs.
A few things I wanted to say. Of course, thank you, Nathan, for sitting in the fiery throne today. I appreciated that. I also wanted to say that this community is amazing because we ask the questions, and I love the people that can ask those questions and go off of each other without conflict. Like, it's totally cool that we had different ideas and views, and that's what CAB's all about. But I love this community's ability to ask the questions that the rest of society doesn't bother to ask, and to think about those things like, time travel and other dimensions and manifesting entities, not unicorns, but, so on and so forth. It's just amazing. So I really appreciate that you're one of the thought leaders on this, Nathan. And, this show is a thought leader on that. So thank you for all of you for coming and talking, and Nathan for the fiery throne.
I survived.
Yeah, and the people have asked for Ask Deb, so we're happy to do an Ask Deb, and we can get all the Deb fans come out there and get her take on everything. So that could be our next one of these. Like Julie says, share. We're trying to grow the show, so just share it with a couple of friends of yours. We don't have a Patreon or anything like that, but any of those sort of metrics of commenting on the episodes, liking, subscribing, and sharing with your friends that you think might enjoy this. We really appreciate it. So on behalf of our British brother, Dave Smethurst, for Debs, and for my co-creator brother, Money Nathan, this is DJ saying peace out. One love. We'll see you down the road. We're always wondering what's up around the bend.